Rightio, so you've gone out and you've invested a bunch of money in a quality pair of boots like these High Country eBay GTX or one of the other great brand, models from LOWA. You want to look after them. So LOWA has a great range of boot care products that you can get to increase the lifespan of your boots, and when you spend this kind of coin on a pair of boots, you really do want to look after them. So don't forget to get the right stuff to look after them as best as possible. So I'm just going to run through how I care for my boots. So basically, once I come out of the bush, if they're covered in mud, I stick them under the tap, and I get in there with the brush and get in and around and get all that dirt off the boot. Generally they're probably a little bit moist, they could even be quite wet from being up the bush for 3 or 4 days. So getting them more wet's not going to be any dramas. Obviously Gore-Tex lining, the boot isn't going to be wet on the inside, but the leather could be quite moist. So yeah, I just get in there and get rid of all that bulk dirt, clean out your tread, whatever, and then I just naturally let them dry. Generally I just leave them in the shed so they're out of the sunlight, definitely not near a fire, because that just dries out and shrinks your leather. So once they're sort of in this condition, so they've been dried out for a few days, that's when we want to just do the final sort of care for the boot itself. So you have got this shoe clean, and it's like it just brings the little bits of dirt that you sort of left behind in the little crevices and in the embedded in the leather and around the stitching and stuff. And basically all you do is go around and sort of go like this, wet it up. And then I would just use my little brush here just to loosen any of that remaining dirt. Quite get around the toe here, very good. While it's still wet. This will also sort of, not remove a stain, but it'll make it a whole lot less obvious if you're sort of worried about that sort of thing. In general, that's all I do. And then just with a moist cotton towel, just rubbing it off, and all you're doing there is just grabbing all that excess dirt and removing it. You sort of see it picking up here. Sort of like a detergent for your boot, I suppose, or soap. It's just to clean the leather really nicely. You sort of see it getting all the grime off. Rightio, so I'd probably go through it a little bit more thoroughly than that, but just for the video's sake, I also I don't like removing my laces, because sometimes they're a pain in the butt to get back in, but if the end's sort of blown out a bit on you or something, so I just like to loosen them right off. And like on this one, you can see it's got some grass seeds and dirt in there. So I've got this little brush here, just peel them back and get in there, get all that out. Probably should have done that before I did the thing, but that's all good. This is just to make sure the tongue and underneath the laces is good, which we might just do this again in there. Nice and wet. Give it a bit of a scratch up, bit of a scrub. Get our wet towel. Oh yeah, look at that. So basically, the cleaner you keep the leather, the longer it's going to last. So I've got right in underneath those shoelaces, and look at all the grime I've got off that. And they're a relatively clean boot. after I'd washed them under the tap. So anyway, then what you can do is just naturally let them dry again. That won't take long, and then we'll continue on with the rest of the process. But just for today, we'll just jump straight into it. The water stop is basically to seal your leather. It's not to make the boot waterproof. The boot is waterproof because of the Gore-Tex lining. This seals off the leather to prevent it from sogging. So you imagine if you got nice dry leather with no sealant on it, and then you go and you know through some wet grass and whatnot, that dry leather is going to soak up the moisture. Your boot's going to become really heavy. So the idea with this is to seal the leather to prevent any sort of moisture getting soaked up by that leather. So I usually give it a pretty good spray, wet it right down into that crevices of the shoelaces. Like to get it nice and wet, especially around the toe. Make sure you're in a well ventilated area here. I normally do this purely outside. Today we just do it in the shed with the door open, but it's quite strong. Anyway, there we go. Nice and wet. And that'll soak in and it'll dry out a little bit. So that's sealed the leather, so we can go ahead and wait for that to happen, and I'll come back and we'll finish off the process with some active cream which just moisturises the leather. Rightio, through the magic of television, the boot is soaked up that waterproofing, and I don't let it completely dry before I start putting the cream on. So we'll get the cream out. So it's just a leather conditioning cream, and all it's doing is putting moisture into the leather to keep it supple, because you don't want your leather to dry out and become rigid, because that's where it'll crack and you'll irreversible damage once it starts to crack, especially on you really want to work it into anywhere where it's got a flex point. But here we go, so it's got the little foam pad on the end. Just give it a squeeze and you literally just liberally apply it to all the leather. Push it right into the corners where the stitching is, get in underneath the eyelets. Do all the leather. Don't be stingy on it. I just load it up. Right, and then I get it right in the tongue. Open up the shoelaces, get it right in the tongue. The old tongue cops a bit of a flogging. Covered in dirt and twigs and grass seeds and whatnot, especially around the toe area, down low here. So get underneath all the eyelets. And there we go. Pretty good. Make sure there's no little dry patches. And that's practically all you need to do. There we go. So, if you do that to your boots every time you come out of the bush, they'll last you a long time. If you abuse your boots and you try and dry your boots out near the fire, the leather is eventually going to let you down. So if you're going to spend this money on a pair of boots, make sure you look after them properly. store them properly, keep them nice and dry. Don't let them, sit out in the weather when they don't need to, and just keep them out of direct sunlight. I also, like when I'm drying them out, pull out the inner sole. It just lets the boot breathe a bit, stops them getting real stinky. You can put a little bit of powder in there to make them smell a bit better, but basically that's my boot prepared, ready for the next trip. And if you do it like that regularly, the boots will last you. My first pair of Tibets were 3 years old, and honestly, the only thing that was wrong with them was the soles worn out, because I'd looked after the leather like this every time I come out of the bush. After 3 years of flogging around up in the Samba Hills there, the leather and the stitching was still A1, and seriously could have just been put onto a new sole, but I chose to get another set. So look after your boots, they'll look after you.